Welcome to First. I'm Shirley Min along with Nichelle Polston. Mark Eichmann is off this week.
Education is one of the items targeted for increased money in 2016. This week, a report on how Delaware makes money decisions for the coming year.
Delaware's congressional delegation was here for our first extra this week. We'll recap some of the conversation, like what to do with our broken highways.
It's kind of a no-brainer, particularly when you have so many members who say no automatically to raising the gas tax.
It's called TDP-43, and a Delaware State University researcher thinks it holds the key for slowing down the effects of Alzheimer's disease. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
Last week, WHYY broadcast Governor Jack Markell's vision for Delaware. But with a vision comes a price tag on how much his programs could cost. Thursday, the governor released his budget. It will go through a few changes before it's passed by June 30th. But in this week's First Look, we have some of the highlights on how a spending plan is created. An increase in education funding once again makes up a big portion of Governor Markell's spending plan. A $15 million increase due to an increase in students helps bring new education spending to $37 million. Total mandatory cost drivers increase state spending by $153 million. Altogether, the budget proposal totals $3.9 billion, with another $385 million allocated for capital improvement projects. That's just a 2.37% growth over the current budget. Because of that low growth, Markell called this a very tough budget. To help rein in costs, Markell wants to cut the school property tax break for elderly residents in half. That would save the state $12.6 million. The governor listed improved addiction treatment as a top priority in his State of the State. His budget earmarks $4.5 million in that effort to double the number of sober living residential beds from 60 to 120. The plan would also double the number of residential treatment beds for youths with opiate addictions. The story of the 2016 budget began months ago. Mark Eichmann picks up that part of our First Look.
Health and public education are the main two expenditure areas.
I sat down with State Budget Director Ann Vasali to see how the budget writing process has changed since Markell took office in 2009.
The challenge we had in 2009 was unique because not only were we putting together the governor's budget for FY10, really similar to where we are right now, but the year we were in saw revenues decline incredibly in the spring. So we were operating in a deficit situation for the current year, which then was FY 2009, while at the same time trying to build a budget for the coming year.
Markell reflected on that first year of his term in last week's State of the State address.
Now, 6 years ago, we faced an economy in freefall, a budget deficit that was skyrocketing. Tens of thousands of our friends and neighbors would lose their jobs, and hundreds of millions of dollars of tough decisions needed to be made to keep our state afloat.
When the state was facing that $800 million deficit in the spring of 2009, we asked residents what their spending priorities were and how they would make those tough decisions.
We asked people to decide how many pennies on the dollar would they allocate.
Public education's a big one.
Health and social services are definitely the top two.
But it's not quite as simple as putting pennies in a cup.
While we would love to address all the needs of state government and everything that everybody wants, we just can't. And especially over the last now 7 years, it's been very challenging fiscal times.
After the budget is approved, often on the last day of the fiscal year, June 30th, the new budget writing process starts within just a few days and continues through the year, often with some heated discussions.
They're intense. They're very intense.
Even though the billion-dollar deficit days may be over, there's still little room for budget growth.
So we're still in a very relatively flat period of time. Governor's budget's been growing on average maybe 2%, a little bit over 2%. And so if you look back historically, that growth is much flatter, much lower than other administrations have seen. You just haven't seen the big spike upward in revenues that maybe were hoped for.
That flat growth has had an effect on state workers who are doing more with less.
What we're seeing is 7 years in a row of probably not making the investments that we should be in the areas of technology, computer replacements, maintaining our facilities. As you'll hear, state employees have not seen significant regular increases in pay.
The benefit of tight fiscal times, Vasali says it makes for a lot of competition.
It's forced us to have to look incredibly closely. Are those programs working? Are they doing what they're saying they're going to do? How are our investments performing? What really is getting the best outcomes?
We should note that the evaluation of state programs varies from education and school construction to programs that help people with disabilities, even the homeless. Vasali says the state is watching outcomes to make sure it's getting the most bang for those taxpayer bucks. Now, the cutting and trimming of state spending started soon after Markell took office in 2009. 600 state employee positions were eliminated as they became vacant, so it really is a much leaner state government than in prior administrations.
Yes, the next step in the budget process is for the Joint Finance Committee to hold a series of hearings all through February and into the middle of March. Any changes in state revenue projections could affect the budget plans, of course. Lawmakers will approve a final budget by the state-mandated deadline of June 30th. Then it all starts all over again.
And we all know what those June 30th all-nighters are like. The governor's budget proposal is out, and you can find more details online at your home for Delaware News, newsworks.org/Delaware.
Coming up on First, research at Delaware State University could help those afflicted with Alzheimer's disease. We'll meet two families who hope that's the case, and the basket lady of Lincoln. When she first moved to Delaware, she had no idea she would make friends through her weaving.
Delaware's congressional delegation will often be at the same events around the state. They'll often be on the same Amtrak train from Wilmington to Washington. And on Monday, they all came to our WHYY First studios to talk about the issues. We present a part of that conversation as our first person this week. I start by asking how we're going to fix our roads and bridges. Governor Markell in Delaware, he renewed his push to modernize infrastructure here in Delaware. So did President Obama. And again, I'm going to reference his State of the Union. He said Democrats and Republicans used to agree on this. Where is the dissension now on infrastructure and modernizing it?
How to pay for it.
Like everything else, really, when you really get down to it.
So it doesn't matter if there's a need. It's really just, it comes down to the bottom line. Okay. He talks about this bipartisan infrastructure plan. What does that look like to you? And this is up for anyone to kind of speak up here.
Well, I mentioned earlier a proposal that Congressman Delaney, myself, and others, and there are other members in the House and probably in the Senate as well, that would use a repatriation process of stranded corporate profits overseas that would be repatriated back to the U.S. at a lower incentivized tax rate, and those proceeds would go into to recapitalize the trust fund. Mm-hmm. We have 50 members. Congressman Delaney has worked on 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. It's kind of a no-brainer, particularly when you have so many members who say no automatically to raising the gas tax. And then it transitions to some funding mechanism, whether it's a gas tax or something else, to keep the trust fund funded into the future. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's an opportunity for Democrats and Republicans to work together around an idea where there's general consensus, in my view.
And we've had a roughly similar bill in the Senate for 4 years, the Bridge Act that I'm a co-sponsor of, that would also bring back stranded U.S. corporate profits that are held outside the United States. The main argument for not doing that, for not paying for it that way, was we're going to have comprehensive tax reform. Just wait, it's coming next month, 6 months, next year. It hasn't happened. That's a bill that's been endorsed by the AFL-CIO and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and would put hundreds of thousands of people to work. I mean, that and other bills that Senator Carper has led on are the ways forward for financing infrastructure.
So is this, again, an issue where you have Democrats are for modernizing it and then coming up with a solution with this transportation trust fund, and then you have Republicans saying, well, no, we don't want to do anything with it?
No, I think, actually, if I may, Republicans support this idea. Mm-hmm. The problem is the point that Senator Coons just made in terms of the context of broader tax reform. Okay. And that's the big issue, and frankly, that's a challenge for all of us, I think, to modernize the tax code. It would incentivize business creation and job creation. It would make it simpler for people to file. It would address some of the issues that you've talked about in terms of middle-class tax cuts. But it's a lot of hard work. Not only hard work, but people really put in the ideological bent behind them and work together to get something done.
Can I say something on in terms of funding infrastructure? There are a lot of ideas, actually some pretty good ideas, and Chris and John have mentioned a couple of them. There other one of the ways we do it in Delaware to fund transportation investments is we have tolling. We have tolling on I-95. We have tolling on State Route 1, and another good idea that's being sort of like bubbling along out in Oregon is they call it a road user charge. It's like vehicle miles traveled, and they got about 10,000 people doing this pilot program out there, and they pay a fee every year that relates to the amount of miles that they travel, and we'll learn from them. Those are the future. We're moving toward a day when we're going to have far more energy efficient vehicles. We already are, and it's going to continue to we'll see improved performance of vehicles. And so the question is, what do we do in the future to raise money? And Chris and John have suggested a good idea. Other good ideas, tolling. Other good ideas, road user charges. In the meantime, for now, the user fees that we've relied on forever in Delaware and nationally, the user fee, the federal gas tax was raised 21 years ago to 18 cents. It's worth a dime today because of inflation. The diesel tax was raised to 21 years ago to 24 cents. It's worth 15 cents. And we need to make some adjustments here. And what I've suggested is to raise the gas tax, the diesel tax, by 3 or 4 cents a year for 4 years. Phase it in over about 4 years, maybe a penny every 3 months for 4 years. And that will fully fund a major transportation investment program for our country. And in the meantime, if we can do the things that Chris and John are talking about, all terrific. We also need to improve our ability to tolling. We need to improve our ability to find a road user charge approach that works.
And the bipartisan bill that I referenced before to recapitalize the fund using repatriated funds would create a study period of time to look at the kinds of ideas that Senator Carper's talking about, and then put those in place.
Okay, we have time dwindling. Want to get to combat missions over in Afghanistan and Iraq. They are over, sort of, in my opinion. We still have troops in both countries, although they are not designated combat troops. But now we have ISIS, ISIL, whatever we want to call them. Obama says the U.S. has taken the lead, but we are trying to delegate some of those responsibilities. Senator Coons, is this the right approach?
Is which the right approach?
That we're
winding down combat operations in Afghanistan,
and that with where ISIS and ISIL are concerned, that at least we are not taking the lead so much and in delegating.
I think we saw in the conduct of the wars in both Afghanistan and Iraq that the United States, a major U.S. troop presence, brought remarkable firepower and capability. But we drew as many opponents. They replaced those who we were able to capture or kill or were replaced almost as quickly as we could engage with them. The strategy that the Obama administration is suggesting relative to Islamic State is to have the boots on the ground be Iraqi or Jordanian or from other allies from the region, and to have the United States provide air support, air cover, intelligence, training, and equipping. I think that is more likely to be successful against Islamic State, particularly in these two countries. I am encouraged by the progress that's being made on the ground in Iraq. I am discouraged by the progress that is not being made on the ground in Syria. The train and equip mission is slow to start. We have some significant challenges in sorting out our strategy with regards to Assad, and we've got some disconnects with our regional allies, in particular Turkey. I think that in the conflict we have today with Islamic State, we either have a turning point moment to really genuinely rally the Islamic and Arabic world to serve with us as our genuine allies, or we will miss an opportunity that will lead to greater conflict and more aggressive jihadist tendencies across the whole region. This deserves a lot of focus, and we've got many other conflicts in the region and other issues, predominantly Iran's search for a nuclear weapon, that also have to be taken into account as we sort out our strategy.
Paris isolated incident, or Congressman Carney, something that we should be worried about, a sign of things to come?
No question, something that we should be worried about. I've worried about it since the president first started talking about arming and equipping moderate rebels there in Syria and in northern Iraq. I think the president in the State of the Union, for the first time, indicated the desire to get a congressional authorization for the use of military force, and I think he ought to do that, to have the debate on the kinds of issues that Senator Coons was talking about, to try to tie it in to the global terrorist threat. The other thing I think I would like to see factored into it is what the declining price of petroleum worldwide is doing to Iran, to Russia, to other players in the region. The Saudis are driving that price down intentionally, and it's having devastating effects on some of the higher cost producers, the Venezuelans, USSR, Iran. How does this play in the mix when a lot of those petrodollars go to funding these rebel groups? I don't have a full understanding of that. I'd like to factor it in as the president seeks an authorization to use military force.
Congressman Carney, we're out of time, but I do want to get this one question. Out of the three of you, you are up for re-election or election in 2016. I'm always up for re-election. But if Beau Biden does not run for governor in Delaware, we are hearing the rumor mill saying that you will run in his place.
Well,
is that true?
Well, as you can tell from the questions that you had and the issues that are before the Congress, I've got a lot of work to do on the 2 years that the people of Delaware have given me to serve in Congress. I'm focused fully on that, and I will continue to be.
With that said, has anyone in the state approached you?
I get approached almost on a daily basis by people talking about this situation. As far as I'm concerned, Beau has decided to run for governor. He's running for governor, and I'm going to support him for that.
Congressman Carney says he's not running for governor, but there will be more conversation about this matter right up until the day that Beau Biden officially announces he will or won't run for Delaware governor in 2016. The full interview, including some candid comments about the partisan nature of Congress, can be found at WHYY.org/first.
In the movie Still Alice, Julianne Moore plays a woman in her 50s who comes to grips that she is in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. Later in the movie, she openly talks to families about how to cope and hope. That's really the key to dealing with Alzheimer's disease. One hope comes from a research project now underway at Delaware State University. It's what families dealing with the disease hope for.
Well, where's the bread?
Quick, over here.
Hey, how about looking up here? We keep it frozen so it doesn't spoil, right? Yeah, there it is.
We all forget where things are from time to time. For Bob and Jane, it's different. Bob is in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease.
April of 2011, I noticed a change in Bob. And then my daughter happens to be a psychiatrist. And they were watching over him while I was gone, and they didn't realize how dependent he had become on me.
Bill and Betty moved to Rehoboth in 1985. This is the home they wanted to retire to and grow old in. But a few years ago, Bill noticed something was happening to Betty.
We noticed maybe 6 years ago that Betty was having little problems, and we thought it was due to these mini strokes, and she was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment.
Well, we look at a gene called TDP43. It's present in about 50 to 60% of all Alzheimer's disease cases.
From this lab at Delaware State University, Michael Gitschow and his team are researching ways to slow the Alzheimer's process, and in the process help Betty and Bob by figuring out why this protein called TDP43 tangles up the brain.
This pathology is present in about 60% of individuals, and of those individuals with this pathology, they show memory deficits at age of death. So we're looking at, in a mouse model, to be able to turn on and off this gene.
Gitschow's mother, Shirley, died from Alzheimer's. It was her affliction that motivated him to get into the field. He said it tore him apart to see his mother deteriorate. For Sargent, he too was devastated.
Stunned, absolutely. absolutely stunned. I just had this view that we had another 25 years ahead of us, and it wasn't to be.
2015 will be their 50th wedding anniversary. Instead of traveling together, Sargent looks for ways to help Betty cope. The Bowsers found each other 15 years ago. Each had been married before and knew this was the real deal.
We were like these two teenagers.
We went all over.
Bob Bowser likes to paint. He still can paint some beautiful pictures. Now he does it by number. The toughest part of his transition came when he could no longer drive.
Where am I going?
And no.
I'd come to an intersection and forget where I was going.
Or confusing a red light with a stop sign. And that's not good. And we have to consider...
Of course, we could change the laws, but...
You see what I mean?
Jane still laughs at Bob's humor. Bill knows his wife's personality is still within her as well.
There's a feistiness to her which exists today and certainly existed from day one.
Betty tried the common medications on the market and didn't tolerate them well. Bob is on Namenda and Aricept, but also takes supplements including some with coconut oil.
The answer tends to be in the ketones. If you can feed yourself products that produce ketones, then the brain cells are going to be able to still live.
A lot of times we have to go back, look up exactly what has been going on, because this is out of mainstream. This has really not been tested through the FDA or anything of that nature.
Dr. Simpson heads up the Swank Care Memory Center, part of the Christiana healthcare system. Their goal is to help in the diagnosis and offer support through counseling and any other way that they can.
If we find a family or a patient that's interested in research, we have contacts with most of the major universities in the area that we can, put them in contact with, and they can find out if they qualify for these specific type of trials.
I think over the course of time, we're very hopeful. There's amazing researchers out there. We're looking at one little small picture of this, is what I'm doing, to try to help gain some understanding of it.
Gitcho hopes the TDP-43 research could produce some results in a few years. In the meantime, Dr. Simpson will continue to lead Swank's counseling efforts. Bob Bowser will continue to paint. And Bill Sargent will leave notes for Betty.
If you look over on the door there's a little message. And that little green message, It says, "I really, really love you."
I saw it.
One observation during this story, whenever Bill got emotional, it was Betty who would offer him comfort. The Delaware State Research Project is a joint venture with the University of Delaware. Professor Gitcho, who says collaboration is the key to getting results, plans to attend several conferences to share his results in the coming years. To learn more about Alzheimer's disease, you can visit christianacare.org/Swank Memory Center or the Alzheimer's Association at alz.org/Delval.
What do you do when you move to another state? And what if your new home is on a farm with no close neighbors? When Bee Whitehead found herself in that situation, she started making baskets. Her work is formed by items she finds in nature. In our first experience, we meet the 88-year-old and see her beautiful baskets.
My name is Bee Whitehead. I have lived here 20 years. The home belonged to, and the property belonged to my husband since his family goes back to 1730s, I believe. I was a teacher for 26 years in Ridley Park, Pennsylvania, where I taught 4th grade. And when I retired from teaching, I was sort of at a loss. Suddenly I'm here on a farm with no neighbors, no one to drop in and have coffee with me. And I thought, gosh, what will I do? And I decided I would take a course in basketry. And took a course with a woman who did the most wonderful baskets by gathering everything in nature. And after spending a whole week with her, I was hooked. I came home, and ever since I've been making baskets. I enjoy making baskets where I can gather all natural things. So you'll see me out in the winter, walking through the woods, looking for honeysuckle vines, roots and vines and lichen and all sorts of things that I find in nature. It is the basic frame that I'm working with that determines what it's going to be. It sort of shapes itself. That's all I can tell you. I just love doing it, and it just seems to evolve. I work on baskets practically every day, at least a couple of hours. Sometimes I get started in the morning working on something, and I might start at 9 o'clock, and at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm still working on this basket. Some of the large baskets take me days to do. The specialist time is trying to construct the framework around the basket. What is it going to be? What shape is it going to take? And it all depends on what I choose as a handle. If it's a very curved handle of honeysuckle or something, then it takes some maneuvering and looking and pinning it together, clamping it here and there till I get a shape that looks as though it might make an unusual basket. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this. I was 88 years old yesterday, and I think, good Lord! It's time for you to stop this nonsense. But I love to do it, that's all I can tell you. And it keeps me busy. I'm a person that has to be busy doing something at all times. So now it might just be reading, but I'm reading up a storm and making baskets in a crazy fashion, I guess. I don't make any money. I just love doing it. It is fun to create something. From nothing to make something.
Bee teaches classes at the Mispillion Art League, where she is a founding member. She shows her work there, as well as the Rehoboth Art League and various shops around Lincoln.
And next week, Jamie Wyeth talks about his retrospective, now on display at the Brandywine River Museum, and the thought process that goes into his work.
And the next morning I woke up and here were all these things scattered around my bed, and I thought, what the hell's this? And then I looked at them, and then I started realizing, oh my God, yes, I dreamed about the 7 deadly sins.
We'll hear more from Jamie Wyeth and a lot more on the next edition of First. That is First for this week. We thank you for watching. For Shirley Min and Mark Eichman, I'm Nichelle Polston. Have a great week.